Hello, I'm your host Sara, and this is Insane. Welcome to this new episode on Insane. Now today we're going to talk about Islamic mindfulness. Considering that it was the topic of research, my PhD research, and I should be going on about it forever, a lot. But I haven't. I've kind of skirted around the subject, spoken about every other thing possible, but not about Islamic mindfulness. Why have you done that, Sara? I ask this question a lot. And it's because it's kind of personal. It gets a bit overwhelming when I have to talk about why mindfulness and what led me to study Islamic mindfulness. Because in all honesty, I felt like I'd been ambushed into doing it. I mean, had I known what the research had entailed, I'm not talking about PhD and it being difficult. I'm talking about the subject and how heavy it was going to be and what transpired. I honestly wouldn't have done it. And for me to explain to you the importance of Islamic mindfulness, I've got to be kind of personal. And yeah, that's perhaps why it's taken this long to do a podcast on it. So I am a private person, so I'm not going to go too personal, but I hopefully just enough for you to connect with it and for it to make clear to you why you should consider Islamic mindfulness and how it is beneficial for you as a Muslim. So, where to start? I was at a time in my life where things were quite difficult, and I made the decision to change. And the change I thought at that time was a good change. And when I say good, I mean beneficial for me. So just to go back a bit, first of all, I'm not the type of person who is all into their feelings. I do not like to get mushy with feelings. I don't like talking about my feelings. And generally, my personality is, if something bad happens, just get on with it. And I used to roll my eyes at anyone who spoke about their feelings too much, and I found it that emotions was a sign, or showing emotions was a sign of weakness. And I'm not, in terms of being girly, I'm not girly. I was like a tomboy growing up. All my friends were boys until the age of 9 or 10, and I liked the activities that the boys were doing, and so that's the type of person I was. And with that as well, there was a lot of activism, certainly at university. I've always been an advocate for human rights, always been, into right and wrong. So very not into my feelings, more into my head. And that's how I was. And then at the stage before going into the research, I had made a decision that my activism and the way that I was in terms of morals and committed to them, people didn't like. And this is the sad truth. People don't like straight talkers, especially for a woman. They don't like intelligence, straight talking, right and wrong. And they certainly don't like people who don't mince their words. And I do not mince my words. If I find something wrong, I'll just say, no, that's wrong. To someone's face. I don't know how to mince my words. I mean, I'm sure if I wanted to, I could, but I don't see, or I did not see why one should do that. I have always been genuine, and I have always been genuine with people, but that is not appreciated, and certainly not from a woman. And so I got to a stage in life where I made the decision where I was going to be more accepted by society. And as a woman, this means becoming more superficial and concentrating on how you looked, and then being very agreeable. And where I thought something was wrong, I wouldn't say it's wrong. I would just hold my tongue and smile. Smile. It's very important you smile as a lady. And just held my tongue. And I made the decision, the conscious decision to do that. Because I thought, my God, I can't find, and I couldn't find, very few people I could find that I could get on with, because the expectation always is that you have some facade, some fakeness attached to you. If you don't, then you're either rude or awkward, and or you're too confident, and you're not allowed to be that. So I made a decision not to be those things, and I spent 1 year like this. And I spent my time on holidays. I was holidaying like 3 or 4 times a year. I concentrated on how I looked. At the time I was living in Dubai, so it was like a ladies only beach, and I was there I think around 5-6 times a week, and the whole day, and between that and the gym. And I said, yep. And I did make friends. I had a group of friends, and I had nothing in common with them, and I would just sit there and we'd talk about really superficial rubbish, and I was like, yeah, at least I have people around me. And I thought I was happy at the time, because everyone tells you that this lifestyle is the dream, and it was accessible to me, and so I lived that dream out to the max, because it was the dream. And I said, this is the dream, isn't it? This is the dream. And then out of nowhere, and I'm telling you it was out of nowhere, because it felt like it was out of nowhere, I started getting panic attacks. And it was like an overwhelming loss of control of my feelings. My feelings were insisting on coming to the surface. My feelings that I had not really connected with my whole life. Like I said, very, level-headed, not really into my feelings. And all of a sudden they were imposing themselves on me in such a rude way. I had no control over them. I was like, what is going on? I had feelings like all of a sudden it's like I'd seen a lion come at me from far away. And I was watching it come at me, and all the feelings associated with that would be inside my body. And in the beginning, it was very scary. I thought, what is going on with me? And I didn't know what was happening to me. And it was scary for a long time. And it forced me to change. At the time, I thought it was the worst thing to have ever happened to me. But in hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And it forced me to ask myself, how did you end up here? You were living the dream life that everyone aspires towards. So how come this dream life of yours results in such bad feelings? And I am truthful with myself. I straight away knew. I said it was because I made a conscious decision to let go of my ethics. Because it's one thing to mindlessly not be conscious of God, and it's another thing to make the decision that you're going to kind of downgrade your connection with God. And that's what I did. And so I knew I had done a mistake. And I knew that it wasn't just because, it couldn't have been because you didn't pray or you didn't fast or you didn't read Quran or you didn't do some dhikr, because I continued to do all of those things. But the thing is, when you make a decision that your religion is just going to be those basics, you lose the spiritual connection with God. And you compartmentalize faith and God to certain times of the day. And there's a problem with that. And my problem was that it led to a lot of anxiety, horror, sad feelings. So I reconnected with myself and I said that this is God telling me that he's not happy with me. He was not happy with me. And so I started to focus on trying to get myself to heal. I had gone to the doctor in Dubai and the doctor dismissed me. He said, there's nothing wrong with you. Despite the fact that I was in the darkest time of my life, he just dismissed me. He said, there's nothing wrong with you. My God, did that make me angry. I mean, there's one thing I don't know if you understand, but I never talk about my feelings. And then I spoke about them because I had to, and the doctor just dismissed me. You don't understand how much anger went through my body because of that. And it was good because that anger, I also helped me heal, because I said to myself, when the panic attack was coming, I was like, don't you dare. Nope. I don't care. No, and I wouldn't give it any, just out of anger. I could feel the anxiety coming. I'd be like, very aggressive towards myself. Like, no, you're not doing that to me. And surprisingly, that did help. But, it doesn't help everyone, but it helped me because that's my personality. I've always been hard on myself and always spoken like that to myself to keep myself in control. And so that anger helped me do that, to get a sense of control again. And no, I'm not going to be controlled by my feelings. I've never allowed it to, so I'm not going to let it now. And so I left Dubai and I went back to London, and I went to the Boots pharmacy, and I went to the pharmacist and I said, right, so I've got these anxiety attacks and I want some medicine for it. And she looked at me and she went, oh, we don't do medicine for that. I was like, what? She goes, you just breathe. Have you tried to breathe? And I was like, breathing? She goes, yeah, like really deeply. And I was so shocked. I was like, what is going on with this? These doctors and the pharmacists, they're supposed to be helping, and they just come out with the most silliest comments. Breathe deeply. So I went home and I Googled breathe deeply to see what she was on about. I was so flabbergasted by that comment, breathe deeply. I was like, what is she talking about? And then I started my whole journey, that this was a whole concept, and people actually spoke about their feelings and sat with their feelings, and they breathed deeply and alone in a room. And I was reading all of this, and like I said, these things are not my personality. I was like rolling my eyes, saying, how could this possibly work? And I didn't want to engage in it because I hadn't really engaged with my feelings. And it took a lot to engage with it. But as I was engaging with it, I recognized the Islamic teachings within all of this. Hang on a second. I've come across this notion in Islam. Hang on a second. Yeah, I've read that in the Quran. And then I started making a lot of links. To be honest, when I first made these links, I was like, why doesn't anyone talk about our faith in this way? Why is our faith only spoken about in like political terms? Why don't people know that Islam is the way to finding peace? Let me do research on this. So when I was doing my research, I thought I was going to get rainbows and butterflies, just like the contemporary mindfulness stuff that I was reading. And I thought, oh, life is going to be so fun. It's going to be so much fun. I can't wait. It's going to be... And then I started doing the research on Islamic side of things, because the first year and a half is just reviewing. And then you start the Islamic side of things. Oh my God. I had to sit there reading pages and pages about death, being in the grave, it being dark, remember this is where you're going, remember death at each stage. How dare you not remind yourself of death? And just pages of death and grave and meeting God. It was really heavy concepts. And I couldn't run away from it. I had to sit there, analyze it, understand it, analyze it, and then rewrite it for my research. The other concept is the concept of Khalifa, which is being God's representative and ensuring that there's good on this earth, and your ethical commitment that you're not here just for yourself. You're here for others. You're here for the concepts of right and wrong and justice and peace. You made a promise to God, a covenant. You've got to fulfill it. These are heavy things. And I wouldn't say I got depressed, but for a while, the colour had drained from my life. I started to see things in black and white. Like there was no passion or enthusiasm for life. I saw life as being very pathetic, not very important. And I went from the dream life of before to not wanting anything. Not wanting it, but being very unenthusiastic about being alive. And I could tell how that could have been therapeutic, because you really don't care what happens when you're constantly reminded of your reality. And I was constantly reminded of it for 2 years. A mirror was held up to who I was inside, and how I thought I was doing all right with doing 5 prayers and fasting and praying, and how actually being mindful of God is more than that. It's the moment by moment awareness of God. Being aware of God for 25 minutes a day or 45 minutes a day, or if you're really good, an hour, is pathetic. And you question, why am I sad? Well, if peace is found in proximity to God and the remembrance of God, then that's exactly why you're sad. It's difficult to come to terms with who you really are. It's one of the most difficult things. It's why people make fun of things like meditation, sitting in your room and contemplating and thinking about yourself. They make fun of it because they know it's difficult. Because most of us would rather die or burn the whole world down than come to face with who we really, really are. And that's just the reality of it. If you mock it, which is how I used to mock it. I mean, I'm not talking about the contemporary stuff. I'm talking about when you put depth into it, when you're sitting down and you're thinking about who you are, how much you've done for God today, how many times today, or for what length of period was I actually aware of God today? If you take yourself to account like that, Am I getting upset with someone because what they said was upsetting? Or is my ego too sensitive? Am I too big-headed? Do I think I'm bigger than I actually am? Do I have an ego problem? Do I put people's views above God's? Do I put too much weight on people's views? And if I do, how much of that actually dictates how I behave and what I'm saying and what I'm doing? And it's tiring, so exhausting, because you constantly find faults and you're constantly trying to correct, and it's like you're never going to be perfect, and you know you're far from it, but you've got to understand that's why you're here. And that's what Islamic mindfulness is about. And that's why I felt ambushed, because Islamic mindfulness is not the same as contemporary mindfulness. It's at a different level. Contemporary mindfulness is all rainbows and butterflies. Don't get me wrong, when I was first going through the panic attacks, it was very, very comforting. The whole sitting down, paying attention to the present moment, not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past. It is comforting. But as I started to heal, it just seemed superficial. There was no depth to it. There was no asking, okay, so why are you suffering? What is the matter with you? I, as a Muslim, I knew why I was suffering. I had neglected God. I had made a conscious decision to turn towards the world and then just have God in the periphery where I'm just praying and fasting and, whatever. And I knew it was that, but I could answer that way because I am a Muslim, because I read the Quran. And so if you don't have those answers, it stops being therapeutic. Islamic mindfulness is deep, and it's because it's God's teachings, is listen up. You're here, it's a test. It's going to be hard, it's going to be challenging, it's not going to stop. But there is solace, there is peace. It will be easier if you connect with God. The more you submit to God, the more you are mindful of God, mindful of why you're here, what's going on, what God expects of you, the more it's easier to take the tests and the challenges and the suffering that you will incur. Will it stop it? No. Will it make it easier? Yes. That's what Islamic mindfulness is about. So next podcast, I'm going to talk to you about the concepts that are associated with Islamic mindfulness as I have researched them. And like I said, my primary source is the Quran. And in the podcast after that, I'll talk about the practical. I hope that this podcast is informative. I mean, I do get asked, what led you to it? So it is one of the most common questions I get asked. So hopefully you found it interesting. Okay, that's it. Until next time, do take care.